Fear is the enemy. Whatever it is that you're going for, man, go hard. Hold on, never give up. You gotta have that mentality, man. I put in the work, I spent a lot of time on the waiting list. Never complained, I ain't never said shit. Shoot my shot, no fear if I miss. Imagine you chasing a dream that you love, only to find out it wasn't enough. You fall on your face, but you get right back up, and you fall back again, but you get right back up, yeah. That's the way that it's always been. Don't nobody care about the grind but you. Nobody putting in the time but you. Make up your mind who you wanna be. I know who I am, know what I want. Live by 2 words, mama mentality. And that's word to my mom, word to my pops, word to my little bro. They said make your mistakes, but don't make excuses on why you can't live and learn. On a couple occasions I damn near went broke, chasing this music thing. And I ran out of hope, I threw in the towel, said fuck the hole in the street. I kept on writing and touring. I picked up a job cause I knew it was important. The money I made, I would stash it away just to fund my recordings. And I didn't wanna stop cause I didn't know how. I would lay in my room by myself late at night and I finally figured it out. I just wanna be the best version of me, make all the music that I wanna make. I don't care what nobody gon' say. You miss all of the shots you don't take. And the answer is no, if you don't ask. If it gets hard, this too shall pass. God is my witness and he got the plan. He got the plan. I put in the work, I spent a lot of time on the waiting list. Never complained, I ain't never said shit. Shoot my shot, no fear if I miss. Imagine you chasing a dream that you love, only to find out it wasn't enough. You fall on your face, but you get right back up, and you fall back again, but you get right back up, yeah. That's the way that it's always been. Don't nobody care about the grind but you. Nobody putting in the time but you. Make up your mind who you wanna be. I know who I am, know what I want. Live by 2 words, mama mentality. Yeah. Remember, man, you only in competition with yourself. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the process. Pleasure and pain. R.I.P. the greatest. 0824.
Check 1 2. Just wanted to take this quick moment to just thank all of you guys for being here today. It is Circle Talk. My name is David. I do have my guest waiting, but I just wanted to take a quick moment to just give my sponsors a thank you. Icon ENT. They did an event this weekend, the All Black Party. There was 400 plus people there. Thank you so much for always being an amazing supporter and a follower of anything that I do, and being a great sponsor and being a part of this. iShotIt.com. If you guys are looking for somebody to get your pictures done and get them done right, obviously the pictures on my walls, you guys can't really see them, but there's my son, you can see. But all the other pictures on my wall he has done. He has a great price right now. It's the holiday season. So if you guys need your pictures done, hit up iShotIt.com and he'll get you done right. Next, we are going to go to Intentions Juice and Smoothies Bar. Marquita Evans, thank you so much for always being a supporter of Circle Talks and everything that we do. I went to an event on Wednesday, Poetry at Intentions. It was such an amazing event. Trust me, you guys. Every 3rd Wednesday of the month, make sure you guys check out those Poetry at Intentions. They're always a place to be, and the levels of intelligence and savvy with their words. It's so amazing, and it's always a good vibe. Always a good vibe. So make sure you guys check that out. Intentions Juice and Smoothies Bar on 52nd. That's out to come away. Last but not least, we're going to go to the Chaya movement, Chaya fashion. Miss Zakia, thank you so much for always being a huge supporter of everything that we do. If you guys don't know anything about what Zakia has going on, she did an event, a pop-up last week, and she has another one coming up next month. All you have to do is hit up the chayamovement.com and find out what information she has going on, and stay in contact. And thank you to all the rest of my sponsors that have been a part of this whole ordeal. So we are going to bring in the panel, and we're going to get into this conversation about domestic violence. So let me go ahead and add them. Okay, so we all are here. Before we get moving, I'm going to go ahead and have them introduce themselves again, because I know y'all know them, but we're going to bring them back so they can introduce themselves one more again. So we'll go ahead and start with Carmen.
Hi, my name is Carmen. They call me Phoenix Rain on Facebook, and I'm. I don't. I can't say that I'm glad to be here because I'm going through some things right now. But when you don't want to do something, that just says you need to do it, and I just need to be here to get support and also to get some advice. My issue is not domestic violence, but mother and child abuse. Not domestic. So, yeah, that's me.
All right. Well, we appreciate you for coming in and spending some time with us, Carmen. And hopefully afterwards we can have a conversation and talk a little bit more.
Definitely.
Let's slide on down to Allison.
Hi, my name's Allison Fine. This is my third time on the podcast. I mean, we'll get into it. So that's what I'll say for now. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate you. Kai.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kai Steplight. I'm excited to be here. This is my second time on the podcast. I enjoyed the first time being able to get to know a little bit about Carmen and Allison's story. Obviously, I go back many years with Mr. David Hayes. So when he reached out to me and asked to be a part of this, these conversations are definitely needed from from the female perspective, but also the male perspective as well. So I'm excited to talk about this today.
Okay. So first off, I just want to remind everybody October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so that's why we have been really focusing on this particular topic. We started off talking about toxic relationships. If you guys didn't catch that one, go ahead and check us out on Facebook or our YouTube channel to get the conversation on excuse me, toxic relationships. But this is a step further. And what does domestic violence look like in most people's lives? We can start as kids. We can, go into the adult situation, but we're just going to dig in and talk about the definition first and foremost. Let me go ahead and give you guys what I have here for the definition of domestic violence first. Domestic violence is a violence or other abuse that occurs in a domestic setting, such as in marriage or cohabitation, such as in marriage or cohabitation. Domestic violence is often used as a synonym for intimate partner violence, and then it cuts off here, which, let me get back here, sorry about that, which is committed by one of the people in an intimate relationship against the other person and can have and take place in relationships or between former spouses or partners. So that's the definition I got. It goes on and on and on, and I can really get into it, but that's off of Wikipedia if anybody wants to, cite for that. So do you got either one of you guys want to I mean, I can jump into my thoughts on it, but I would love.
I sent you a message. I do think that you really need to have a trigger warning on this episode. These are very touchy, sensitive topics for people. So I just want to make sure that you remind that your viewers that if that they may hear or feel things that are triggering for them, and to make sure that everyone feels free to step away if they feel overwhelmed or emotional. I'm hoping that you'll put resources up for people who are in situations, and just it's really important to always have trigger warnings when you're having these kinds of conversations, because they may hear things that that shock them or upset them, and you just always want to be very mindful of your viewers to make sure that they are emotionally safe when they're watching your podcast or listening to your podcast.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I'm not sure exactly what's going on with Kai. It keeps kicking you.
I think he went inside.
Oh, okay.
We can't hear you. You're on mute.
So absolutely. You're absolutely correct about that, Allison. For sure, for anyone that is just coming on, this is definitely going to be something that is going to touch on some very, touchy things. It's gonna. I mean, we've all been in situations or know of people that have been in situations that has some kind of domestic dispute. And so, if you are watching and you do hear something that may affect you, please make sure to either step away if necessary, or if you want to talk to one of us privately, you're more than welcome to hit any of us up privately. Oh my gosh, I got problems talking today. But we are here to try and help anyone that's in a situation where they are feeling uncomfortable, or they're feeling like they're in a corner and they can't get out of it. This is why we're here. This is why we're here to have this conversation, is to try and be a light in someone's dark places. And so hopefully this conversation helps you along whatever it is that you're going through. If not, and you would like to talk to us, like I said, hit us up. And if you need to step away, please do so. Because we're going to get in there. We're going to dig in. So, I mean, I'll just start. For me, I'll just talk about my thoughts of domestic violence and where it all kind of came into effect for me. Obviously, Kai, you probably know me better than most. Coming up, I experienced domestic violence at a very, very young age. I didn't realize what it was. I didn't understand it, but I knew that it was not a normal thing. And in my family, my father was obviously in the military, and when he got out of the military, he, was discharged, and he kind of went through some stuff when he was in war, and brought whatever it was he was dealing with when he was in war, he brought it home. And so he was just not in his right mind. And instead of, leaning on his family for support, he was against us. And so not to get into too detail of everything that transpired, is just a lot of what we dealt with was pushback. Like I have 3 other brothers, and like, instead of us always looking up and loving our dad and spending time with our dad was always about pushing us away and not really giving us the opportunity to build a loving relationship with him. And so we dealt with it from that aspect, and then we heard a lot of things that transpired between my mom and my dad that kind of got us a real quick definition of what domestic violence was in our home. And so for me, I had learned very, very early that this is not how I wanted to live my life. And so I definitely went through some trying times, but at the same time, like I learned a lot about, just how to treat people. And I mean, really, that's my thoughts. I don't really want to get too deep. I'll pass it on to the next person.
David, can I offer to you a couple things?
Sure.
Number one, I just want to be very clear that domestic violence is about partnership. If your father was harming you, then that was child abuse. Those are different things. Number one. Number two, what you said was it became my dad was against us. And based on the very little information that you provided, my guess is your dad wasn't against you. Your dad was against himself, and he wasn't getting the healing that he needed.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever was happening in your home, whether it was to your mom or to you and your siblings,
Mm-hmm.
was a symptom of his inability or unwillingness or whatever to get the help that he needed. So I want to reframe
Right.
that, because what you said was he was against us. And my guess is he wasn't against his family. He didn't know how to deal with himself in those spaces.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a very common issue. But by you framing it as he was against us, it makes it seem like you guys did something wrong and you didn't. So
Good point.
I just want to be clear,
Good point.
because a lot of kids grow up in those situations. A lot of kids
for
grow
sure.
up watching domestic violence between their parents and their
Mm-hmm.
partners, whether it's their parents or their parents and their other partners or whatever that looks like.
Right.
And sometimes that, turns into abuse of themselves. I will say I'm a social worker with a extensive history on both sides of this issue. So that's why I'm not just talking out of my ass. I come from an education that supports, what I'm saying. So I just want to be clear about that, because it almost makes me sad the way that you frame that. But I also understand it. Like my dad was the oldest of 8 Catholic kids. He got his ass whooped at home, all the time. And when he raised me and my personal favorite, I don't know what that was, but when he raised me and my brother, he didn't want to physically abuse us, but he ended up emotionally abusing me, especially, very bad. And it wasn't until my dad died, and he died very young, he died at 59, that I heard his siblings refer to him as my grandfather's punching bag. So it's like, those are generational issues. But, I also understood my dad a lot more when I understood a little bit more of what he went through. It doesn't, I'm big on reasons and excuses. Something can be a reason for something. That doesn't make an excuse. But what my dad did to me came from a place of being unhealed from what his dad did to him, and what my great grandpa did to my grandpa, and generation to generation, right? So I want to be clear, and I don't know that provides you any healing or anything, but I did want to reframe sort of that thought. I don't think it was, probably not your dad was against you. It was your dad didn't know how to function with himself.
Well, yeah, I understand the whole situation of him having PTSD. He never got any help when it came to that. Never went to any counseling, any of that stuff. So I get that part. Of him not getting any support. He didn't want it. He thought he could beat it all. And so, he dealt with it the way he dealt with it, which was drinking and drugs, And so, that part may not have been, the us versus him. It was against us part, I just, when I say we've all been through it, yeah, I've seen lots of things that were domestic violence. I was just trying to lighten my part so that everyone else could get into theirs. And I mean, we'll dig into the details of life. Most of you guys already know my details because I don't have a problem sharing it. That's my way of healing, is talking about it. And so,
you and me, yes,
that's how I've always dealt with it. And so, I trust. I understand the difference between just child abuse and domestic violence. But I get what you're saying. Is at the same time, I definitely understand that part. So
I'm kind of going through the same thing. Like my mom, when I was 6, I was taken away from my mom. And before I was taken away, there was a lot of child abuse, a lot of trauma, a lot of, just negativity.
Mm,
And no one chose to get me help until I became an adult, where I had no other choice but to go for help.
mm,
Um, right now, okay, so my mom, she's 74 years old. And see, I don't feel like I'm putting my business out there. If y'all want to take the
mm.
weight of what I got to say, go on, because it's off of me.
Yes.
But my mom, she's 74 years old. Um, I was taken away from my mom when I was 6 years old. So there was no, she didn't really raise me. But let's come to today. My mom is in the hospital and she has her dementia starting to set in really bad. And her mental health. My mom is suffering really, really bad from her mental health because the only thing she seems to remember is the trauma in her life. And I'm trying to set aside, because I live here and she lives in Pennsylvania. I'm definitely trying to set aside my feelings and how I felt or feel she did me, to do what I can to make my mom comfortable. Am
Mm,
I angry? Hell yes. Hell yes. Because even to this day, you still treat me like shit.
mm, mm. Yeah.
And now it's like I'm the one that has to be there. I have 3 sisters, okay? The oldest sister, okay, was raped by my mom. My oldest sister is my mom's sister, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
So there's no relationship between her, because every time my mom looks at her, she gets that PTSD. I have a baby sister who has her own family, and through the grace of God, she was able to go to Pittsburgh for a few days and check on my mom.
Mm,
Um, I say all this to say mental health, domestic violence, child abuse, if you don't get help for it early, then you're going to have to wait till you're an adult. And when you get an adult and you don't pay attention to the things that you know are going to harm you and harm others, then you're going to continue to go through that cycle. I've been in therapy for over 30 something years,
mm,
and I'm still in therapy. So am I wrong because I feel the way I feel about my mom? I love my mom, but my mom, because of her trauma, and like I said, the only thing that she seems to remember is the trauma that she endured in her entire life.
mm.
Her mom died when she was 3 years old. My mom's 74, and she still talk about it like it just happened yesterday.
I mean, I think you mentioned she has dementia, right?
Yes.
I think,
Yeah.
I mean,
And then she still uses. So
number one, Carmen, I'm just going to say this, and this might sound really harsh. You don't have to take care of your mom. That's reality. You don't have to.
that's
We
my
feel
mom.
obligated. We feel obligated to do that as
Yes.
family, but we don't have
Yes.
to. And if you're going to, then you you're gonna have to be able to just set your limits and your boundaries in terms of how to deal with her,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't need to. From what I've learned about you on the last show and what I'm hearing now, I mean, this really isn't domestic abuse. Again, this is child abuse
Child,
that has now turned
yes,
into just, you know,
yeah.
abusive relationship that you've had. It sounds like most of your life, but at the end of the day, if you choose to be in your mom's life until she's not here anymore, you're gonna have to find your own boundaries, and you're gonna have to get your own therapy. I mean, you're in therapy. I know you said that, but you're gonna have to deal with that in your own therapy, in your own
Mm.
therapeutic ways, because you can't change her. And
Not
now
at
Right.
she's
all.
sick on top of it, and she can't do anything about that dementia. You know what I'm saying?
It
And
it
she
makes me
uses.
it makes me sad that I know she's suffering mentally,
Yeah,
Mhm.
not
makes me
not
sad too.
not physically, but she's suffering mentally, and I know what that's like to suffer mentally because of the traumas that were put in my life, not by me, but by like basically you're just dealing with somebody else's shit, because you didn't cause that trauma, and it's just a mental thing right now, and I love my mom, man. I just love my mom.
Um, I mean, I think that you're gonna have to figure out what's healthy for you, because at the end of the day, your
Ain't none
mom
of
won't.
this healthy for me. Ain't
Well,
none of this healthy
it,
for me, but I do understand that sometimes, I got to step outside of myself in what I'm going through. And because of the therapy that I've had, I'm able to do that. But sometimes I just need to let loose because there's nobody around who actually understands the whole dynamic of the relationship that me and my mom have.
Mm.
That's my mom. And then the Bible say you better do right by your mom and dad. And
Right.
because she's done what she's done, it's an obligation. But I do love my mom.
Can I add something if that's all right?
Yeah.
Please
Um,
do.
as far as domestic violence, and I know that we're starting to kind of talk a little bit about child abuse. I don't have any experience personally with domestic violence, whether it was me seeing it or me personally dealing with it in relationships. I don't have any experience. What I do have experience with is when you coach basketball and you coach youth sports for as long as I have since I was 18.
Mhm.
You start to find and see and learn that there's a lot of kids that are dealing with abuse from their parents, abuse from older siblings, and so um, it's 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 a lot because like you can totally see how it's changing the lives of the kids and how they start to act different and they start to kind of transform and start to kind of think that that's just how life is supposed to be. That's the reality.
Mhm.
And it's really sad to see. It's ironic that we're having this discussion today because I just found out this morning that a young man that I used to coach, um, is now looking like he's going to spend some time in jail.
Mm.
And a lot of it, it's crazy because when he was young, I kind of saw that there was a path that he was going down, and I knew at some point potentially that it was going to lead to where it's at right now. And it had a lot to do with situations at home, you know,
Mhm.
um, abuse from family and stuff like that, and how he's transitioned, he's transformed into this person he is today because of the traumas that he's dealing with. And so, just kind of speaking of the domestic violence point, I think that there's no way of really knowing somebody, and kind of talking from a relationship aspect.
Mhm.
There's no way of really knowing somebody until you kind of go through some things. When you get into a relationship, everything is fine. You think that you know somebody's background. You think that you met their parents. You think that you kind of have an idea on this person. And then, a year or two down the line, something happens where there's a physical altercation, and either she hits him or he hits her, and then you start to kind of see a different side of that person. And whether or not they say it's the last time or not, you're at a crossroads, and at that point you have to decide, is this something that I'm willing to go ahead and see through, or is this a red flag for me to kind of exit left? And I think that that's always, from what I've seen, that seems to be very difficult for people to decide, like to truly just say, you know what, before this goes any further, before, you know, I become a victim of domestic violence, before, you know, I find myself maybe in a situation that I see other people, you know, people in that are dealing with this, I'm just gonna leave. After 2, 3, 4 years, however long it is, a house, you know, bills, a family built up, you've built a life together. It's hard for people to just leave, you know, and I think
Right.
that's the crossroad that a lot of people come to. Like, you know, do you just leave,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that that potentially is a start of domestic violence?
Yeah, I got a question though, because domestic violence is it a learned behavior? Do you think most people that are in these domestic violence disputes or situations, do you think the person that is committing these altercations, these situations, whatever it is, do you think it's something
Crimes.
that
Can
we
we call them
learned?
what they are? They're crimes.
Is it a learned behavior or
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think if you grow up in a home and you're watching your dad beat your mom's ass, or you're watching your mom abuse your dad emotionally,
Mhm.
then those are behaviors that you could potentially, uh, you know, mimic in your own life or recreate in your own life. Those are behaviors that you have to be intentional about not repeating. Essentially,
Yeah,
it's no different than if your parents were drug addicts, you know, as you grow up, or alcoholics, as you grow up, you have to be mindful of the environment that you lived in, and you have to make a conscious decision that I will not behave in the way that the people who raised me behaved. So
mhm,
I think that they can be learned behaviors. Domestic violence also comes from a place of necessity, comes from a place of power and control.
mhm,
Um, I know in it comes from a place of mental health issues. You know, a narcissist can develop behaviors that are considered domestic violence when they're not getting their way, and their partner pushes back, and then they respond in a violent way, either emotionally or physically or both, because they're not getting what they want out of that person. I want to be clear about a few things. Number one, we think of domestic violence as a man hitting or harming a woman. It is not always that.
mhm.
There are plenty of domestic violence that happen in same-sex relationships. There's plenty of domestic violence that happens to men from women, and that's something we don't talk about very often because a lot of men don't want to be seen as weak or as less than, and the the way that society looks at men is that they're supposed to be strong all the time, and so we don't hear about how often women abuse men because it happens regularly.
Absolutely.
So I think it can be learned behaviors if you are seeing that growing up and you are not making a conscious decision to not repeat those behaviors. And it also stems from the power and control that someone wants, and and when they're trying to exert that power and control and it's not working, then violent behaviors usually starts with emotional abuse and verbal abuse, maybe financial abuse, and then could in theory turn into physical abuse. um
That was a great point, though. I
Yeah.
love that you brought that part up because me and Q was actually talking about it earlier today. I went online to look up domestic violence, and then all of the pictures, like 90% of the pictures are always a guy, you know, lashing out at a female. So I
yep.
mean, that's a great point. I'm glad you hit on that.
Mhm.
There are lots of women that do it, and there are lots of men that don't talk about it.
And
Yeah.
it's not, and another thing that you said, which I think I also mentioned it in the definition is that it's not just about hitting. It's, sometimes it could be the words that you say, beating somebody up verbally and financially even. There's ways of, financially domestic abuse is and violence is done. So, I mean, yes, there's more violence than just physical. It's all of them, all of the above, and so don't want to miss out on that as well as you're going through whatever it is that you guys are going through. I mean, make sure you guys are watching. What are some of the signs to get out? Because we all know, like, there's got to be some type of triggers that can either prevent us from being going from abuse to violence. Is there any signs that we look for, and any ways that we can prevent ourselves from being in those situations? What do you think?
I think it's we talked about is it a learned behavior? Is it
Hmm.
something that you witness growing up and it becomes kind of a part of your psyche?
Yeah.
And I think that some of the signs can start even before adulthood. What I'm saying? As you're growing up, if it's something that you've seen, you've witnessed, you've been a part of, I think recognizing, really as a family, like, I guess maybe we're talking about parenting too. Maybe we're talking about that as well. And the parents taking accountability for what they've put their children in, and to seek the help early on to
Yeah.
try to rectify any situation, rectify anything psychologically or mental that these kids might carry on into adulthood.
Hmm.
And I kind of always talk about it from a child aspect, because I deal with children a lot, specifically in a sports aspect. And so when we talk about signs and red flags, like I see it early on, when they're 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. And it's something that they're dealing with. And I know I'm like, man, he or she could really use some help right now. And they don't get the help. And then I see when they get to early adulthood, 21, 22, 23, I see the kind of people they turn out. And it's like, man, like if
Hmm.
they would have gotten some help early on, maybe it could have curbed some of the things they're dealing with now. And so from my perspective, I see the signs early on when they're young. And it's just unfortunate because there's only so much that I can do. There's only so much that I can do. And unfortunately, there's a lot of kids having kids,
Yeah.
and they're not grown. They haven't grown up themselves. And
Hmm.
you have to really care enough about, the children that you're raising, and to be aware of what they're being, what they're exposed to, you know. So that's my take on it.
Um, do you want me to tell my story?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm sort of in a unique situation because I have been in a few different situations that are considered domestic abuse. I did go over a lot of this in my very first time being on Circle Talk back with David. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go over this. But at 19, I was in a relationship with a man who was my age. Um, he was very popular. I had a low self-esteem. We he was very popular, and like everybody wanted to date him, and I dated him at the time, and I had my own self-esteem issues that created this 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 sort of false reality that I needed to do what I needed to do to stay with him because he got me out. He got me, I was his girl, and I was never traditionally beautiful, and really I kind of grew up with dudes, so I grew up in a very different space where I wasn't the girl that everyone wanted. So I got with this guy, and he was nice to me, and we had a fairly good relationship at first. But when things started to get bad, namely he started cheating on me and not treating me very well, I decided I didn't want to be with him anymore. Um, well, I kind of wavered. I sometimes I didn't want to be with him. Sometimes I wanted to love him into getting better, which doesn't happen, by the way. Um, and there were incidences where he physically abused me. One incident specifically where He didn't have a car. I did. We were out at one of his relatives' house. I mean, I'm just going to call it what it is. We were at his mom's house. She had her own issues with abuse. She had her own issues with substances, her own stuff going on. And we were about 30 minutes from where we lived. And I got to the house that night, this one particular night. I got there. He was actually on the phone with somebody else. And I was like, oh, if you're going to be on the phone with another bitch, then like, I don't need to be here. And he blocked the door and would not let me leave. And when I tried to, physically get out of the door, he hit me. And then he at one point had my arm pinned behind my back, to the point where I thought he was going to pop my shoulder out of its socket. And his mom heard us, tussling or whatever in her room. She came out and he told her to take her ass back to the fucking room. And that's a quote. And she did. And she left me out there. And he wouldn't let me leave that night. We ended up, spending the night at her house, and we went back to where we lived the next day. We didn't live together. We just lived in the same city. And I should have left him then, but I didn't. And, because one part of the cycle of domestic violence is the apology, is the, I'm sorry, I'll never do that again. I was drinking too much, or I was, I had a long day at work, and the excuses behind why someone harms the other person. And so I accepted that apology, and I loved him, and I thought he loved me. So we continued on in this very unhealthy relationship. So I would say that that's more of like what someone would call like a typical domestic violence relationship, where there's cycles that are, times that are good, and times that, the one person, the abuser, is abusing, the victim. And then there's an apology time, and then the cycle starts over and over and over again. So that's one situation that I've been in. The other situation, and the situation that more people who know me are familiar with, was that 5 years ago, I was married to a man who was bipolar. I think I talked a little bit about this on the last episode. He was bipolar, and using drugs and alcohol instead of meds to deal with his bipolar disorder. Honestly, he was in denial that he had a mental health disorder. So he used drugs and alcohol, and I love this man, and we had a very good life when he was sober, which was most of the time, to be honest. And there was an episode, October 7th, 2018, where I was sort of at my wit's end. And as much as I love this man, I knew that we could not continue down this path. And so I sought out help from the King County Crisis Line. And he was coming down off of a high, and his drug of choice in those moments was methamphetamine. And that particular night, he ended up having a psychotic break, and he ended up stabbing me 9 times. And he was arrested for murder initially. I went to Harborview, which is our level 1 trauma center here. I spent 35 days there. And he ended up, after 2.5 years, taking a plea of attempted homicide, and getting a 12-year sentence for that. That is also obviously domestic violence. That's extreme domestic violence. It's a very weird kind of domestic violence, though, because there were not a lot of signs that led up to it. Even though the drugs and alcohol were an issue, he never threatened to harm me before. I never felt unsafe around him before. So I've had 2 very different experiences with DV in that way. And one of the questions that you asked a minute ago, David, was like, how do you know to get out? And the reality is, especially with the situation with my husband, it was hard, right? I loved him. He was my husband. We had a good life in a lot of ways. We were building and growing in life. And in my mind, his issue was with drugs and alcohol. And that was something he was even in classes for. He was going to AA meetings. He was going to some other programs. I thought that eventually I could get him to realize that he needed to get his mental health in order, because I knew that is where the root of the issue was. But you can't force someone there. You got to let them kind of figure it out for themselves.
Exactly.
So I was trying to like
Exactly.
push him in that direction, but we weren't there yet. And then this happened. So when the question is how do you know when to get out? Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't. And then I brought up financial abuse, because that's what happens to a lot of people. A lot of people. And I'm being intentionally vague about pronouns, because I want to keep a lens on the fact that it's not just men against women. It's not.
Right.
But when the victim, all the time, there's abuse of every kind amongst every gender. But when it comes to financial abuse, the reality is this: there are a lot of people who end up financially dependent on their partners. And if I know that I'm the person who works, you're at home raising the kids, or you're at home not working for whatever reason, and you're dependent on me, especially if you are unable to work. Let's say you have a disability, or let's say that you have some sort of an illness, or let's say we do have 3 kids. And if you were to leave, there's no way you'd be able to afford all of that. Then I'm in a position of power. And then when you do something I don't want, the financial dependence alone is why a lot of people stay in relationships, because they don't see a path out. They don't see how I got 3 kids. How am I going to raise my kids? Like, I'm not leaving my kids here with the abuser. So I take my kids. What do I do? Where do I live? How do I pay my bills? How do I feed my children?
Right.
And that is a big reason why people don't leave, is the financial dependence that they have on the other person. And the abuser often knows that, and they take that to their, they use that to their advantage.
That's one of my pet peeves when, you talk about domestic violence, and people, they be like, well, why didn't you just leave?
It's not that simple, honey.
I'm like, are you really that ignorant? Like,
there are a lot of people that are that ignorant.
Yes.
And like, lucky for them, right? Lucky for them that you've never been in that situation.
Yes. That thank God for that, because some people don't make it out, you know what I mean? And that's the sad part about it. You have to die. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, you go through stuff, mental abuse and things behind other people's actions and behaviors. And you're supposed to deal with that. Well, what about if you don't know how to deal with that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Then it creates a bigger problem. Because there's women, last show, I said I didn't know anything about domestic violence because I never been involved. But actually I have been, but I don't know if you would call it domestic violence, because I would start it and my partner would finish it. Like, we would, you know what I mean? Like, we would fight, we would physically fight together.
Yeah.
Now I call that toxicity. Is that domestic violence?
Yes, of course it is. It's just 2 ways. I've actually, I didn't mention that, but when I first moved here 10 years ago, I was coming off of a divorce from my first husband, and I got with a partner, and that's what happened. He started hitting me, and I started fighting back, because I was like, I'm not putting up with this shit. It was an unhealthy, toxic relationship from the beginning.
Yes.
But the reality was, instead of kicking him out, I would fight back. And usually domestic violence has a component of power, right? And in that situation, really, I had the power, because he lived with me. I was paying the bills. He had some health issues going on. but he was hitting me, like he was abusing me.
Yes.
I just
Yes.
wasn't taking that shit anymore.
Right.
So it's definitely still a form of domestic violence. It's more of a mutual form of domestic violence, though. And that's another thing we don't like to talk about. We don't like to talk about, we think of domestic violence as a woman with 3 kids and a black eye and fucked up ribs and a man who's just screaming at her angrily. And that is not what DV always looks like. In fact, it often doesn't look like that. There's so many other forms of DV. But yeah, in that situation, Carmen, it sounds like you were the perpetrator and the victim. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's why I said I didn't understand if it was considered domestic violence, because it was both of us. And, that's a scary situation, where you, like you said, you're the victim and the perpetrator.
Yeah.
That's
it's the same kind of idea that, like, child abuse, we briefly touched on that, right? It's the same idea that you can abuse your child and still love your child. As a social worker, the first 2 years I lived here, I worked for like CPS social work, and then I moved on to work with people with disabilities. But I am a firm believer. I've seen some of the worst of what people do to children, right? But I am a firm believer that you can be terribly abusive to your children and still love them, because the abuse doesn't come from disliking your kids. It comes from a mental health issue. It comes from substance abuse. It comes from not knowing how to parent. Usually all of those things together.
Yeah.
But I have seen people who have, some of the, like, beating their kids, not neglecting their kids, physically harming their kids, who still love their children.
Yeah.
They're sick. They're sick and they don't know how. I shouldn't say they don't know.
And that's what I'm saying. And now the child has to deal with those issues.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying?
That child has to grow up and hopefully not repeat the cycle.
So, like, I'm the one you guys are talking about. I was in the system, okay, ever since I was 6 years old till I aged out. And I was assaulted. I was sexually assaulted, and these people knew. You know what I'm saying? These people knew what was going on, but they still left me in that situation. And even till now, I don't have faith in the system. You know what I mean? Not saying that, if this didn't happen to me, would I still be this type of person? I don't know that. But I know.
And that's a whole nother topic, right? Because that is, you got put in the system, in theory, to get you help, and the system harm. So that's a whole nother episode. Because I got a lot of feelings about that right there. But
so I was.
Do you feel like your mom loved you?
My mom loves me, but she don't like me.
There you go. And that's exactly what it is. There are a lot of parents who abuse their kids. Abuse is often a response to something, and many times it's unintentional, right? Like, we're frustrated, so we're going to give you a spanking, but that spanking was a little too hard, or we did something terrible.
It took me till today to understand my mom. After years and years and years and years and years and years of therapy, because I went through the same thing my mom went through. You know what I'm saying? So she couldn't give to me what she didn't have. Right. I couldn't give to my daughter what my mom couldn't give to me. So I had to learn from the streets, or I had to, do what I need to do. Now, I was an addict. I did all that. But I can honestly tell you, today, I am the best me. Not because of other people, but because of the initiative. I care enough about myself to understand that my behavior sometimes hurts other people. And so
I think that you bring up a point. How do I unlearn those behaviors before I become an adult, right? And this is something that ties us back to that toxicity episode. I talked a lot about learning things in school, or that school should be teaching these types of things. And I wish I don't know where Kai went, but
he had to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that, well, I don't think I will. I mentioned this briefly in the last episode, I'm sure of it, but I spoke at an event at the City of Federal Way, and there was a bunch of high schoolers there. It's a complicated event, so I won't explain it, but there was a bunch of high schoolers there, and I spoke at this event, and it had to do with domestic abuse. And at the end of that event, a group of teenagers came up to me, and they told me at least 4 different versions of the story, which were, my friend is in a DV relationship. My friend, I think my friend is getting beat up by their boyfriend, or is getting harmed by their boyfriend, or being controlled by their boyfriend. Because sometimes DV starts off as control, right? Not letting you use your phone, checking your phone all the time, controlling the finances. That's how it starts before the actual, physical abuse maybe starts. But it was eye-opening and incredibly sad to hear these young people say, I think this is happening. Now, I'm not saying our generation didn't do it, because I'm sure they did. But I feel like, maybe I was just ignorant to it back then. But these young people, 16, 17 years old, saying, I'm scared for my friend's life because I don't know what their boyfriend might do to them. I don't, you know what I'm saying? So I think that it goes back to the cycle that you were in, Carmen, is not, you can't go back and fix that, right? You're in your 50s. But what can happen now is you could teach your grandchildren, this is what you don't put up with. These are behaviors that you do not accept. Okay. Your generation was harmed, but you can help fix the next generation. So I think if we educated kids very young, then I think that we would be better. It would take a few generations to normalize the conversations, but if we started teaching this stuff in school, and those of us who were abused and who were in these situations started teaching others what to look for, where the resources are, whatever, then in future generations, maybe we can start to alleviate some of this.
Absolutely. Because see, back in my generation, the husbands, they beat the wives, and you never heard of it. You know what I mean? People don't, back then, people didn't talk about, you wasn't supposed to tell nobody what was going on inside your house.
That's because in generations before you and me, because you and I are both Gen Xers, prior to Gen X, we were financially dependent on men, right? Yes. So let me be clear. I've made it very clear through this thing that it could be any gender against any gender. Yes. But it is primarily women who are the victims and men who are the perpetrators. And until the boomers, you know what I'm saying, which are our parents, they were the last generation where men were almost always the breadwinners, and that women were financially dependent. So men could get away with whatever the fuck they got away with, because where you gonna go? Who's gonna pay your bills? And
it'd be said to you just like that. Where you gonna go?
100%.
Just like that. Where you gonna go? Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. So Generation X is the first generation where women started we started saying we can raise our kids on our own. We don't need a man. Like we're whatever. If you don't want to be a man, I'll take care of mine.
I got a question.
The first generation to start actually talking about this, and I think generations to come, Now, I also will say something. I will add to this. When I was in college, when I was getting my bachelor's, I worked at a nonprofit in the Bay Area where I sat in a middle school and I taught a seventh grade, the entire seventh grade, I taught them a drug and alcohol prevention class, right? So they each came to me, 30 kids at a time, and spent a week or 2 weeks with me where we talked about don't do drugs. This is how you say no, all of those things, right? This is back in 2006 and 7, right? So we can teach our kids that they shouldn't do drugs, why they shouldn't do drugs, how they should say no to drugs, all of that stuff. Now, lots of them had really grandparents that were part of the crack epidemic, right? Because I taught at very diverse schools, mostly Black and brown. So we have these prevention programs in schools to teach kids not to do drugs, why they shouldn't, and how to say no. Why do we not have the same thing for domestic violence? What it looks like, who's affected, how you seek help. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are programs that exist. I won't say that there aren't, but that should be part of every kid's curriculum at some point. This is what DV is, and it's hard because some of those kids, they're like, but that's what my dad does to my mom. But that's what my mom does to my dad.
Yeah.
You know? So it's a bigger issue.
Margaret,
If every kid got some form of education, the likelihood is more people would identify it and walk away or ask for help. The fucked up thing is when you're using drugs, you're doing that to yourself. And if you die, it's because of what you did. In these situations, I mean, I just had a friend this summer. I won't say a friend. 2 people I went to high school with in California. They lived in Vancouver, Washington. I didn't even know that because I'm not in touch with those people. But another friend sent me an article and they were like, read this. And I was like, what is it? And I opened it up. These people had moved from Southern California, where I went to high school, to Vancouver. They've been married for 20 years. They had some sort of a DV issue. There was a restraining order. He came to the house, shot her dead, and shot himself. And that's the other side of that. When it comes to drug and alcohol, we kill ourselves.
Yeah.
When it comes to DV, we kill each other. And often women are the victims. So there's a lot more to this, and there's a lot of nuance here. But if we started with some prevention, if we started an education, then maybe we could lessen the amount of people that end up staying in these relationships and not getting any help. And maybe we could stop the amount of people that are dying.
I'm going to go ahead, David, because I know you wanted to ask the question.
No, I was just thinking because you guys were touching on financial situations where, you know, the women aren't doing the money. The man is doing all the making the money and the woman is taking care of the home or whatnot. And it just made me think about my mom's. My mom's had 2 degrees. She was a police officer. My dad was in the military. My dad went to the military, came back from the military. My mom got out of the force and just took care of the kids. But she still, you know, she still had her 2 degrees. She still had an opportunity to do what she wanted with her life. She was highly educated. But she stayed in this situation where my dad would, every night, me and my brothers would be sitting in the bed listening to my mom yelling and saying, "Stop, Dad, stop, Papa, stop, Papa." That's what she called him all the time. There was a one time I seen her, literally, I watched my dad like beat her up like a dude, like closed fists. And I was just like, why are we still here? Why don't we get out of here while we still can? And we did leave, but then my mom ended up going back. It's like, what
did you ever ask her why?
I would never ask my mom that, just
Are your
because.
parents still alive?
Yeah, they both live they live together in Texas.
So they're still together.
Still
I mean,
together.
why don't you just ask them, David?
Just don't. Just steer clear of it.
Because you know what, you can. You can't. I mean, you can't
I'm
just
not.
ask the question like that. You can't without bringing up a whole lot of feelings, a whole lot of.
I'm not afraid of feelings.
See, there's just certain things that I don't want. I myself don't want to deal with. You know what I mean?
I fully get that, but I think that we don't heal ourselves if we don't put ourselves in uncomfortable situations.
Sometimes you're not going to ever get a why.
And David, you don't have to be specific, and you may not know, but you said you're one of 5 boys, right?
Yeah.
Have any of those boys gone down the way of your dad?
My brother's locked up right now for DV. Yep. My youngest brother.
You got a military dad. You got a military family. That's on a totally different level. Like that, the military's mindset is so. They see things that we would could not even imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they see things. You know what I'm saying? That's why a lot of them don't like the 4th of July. And PTSD is very, very strong in military families. So, David, I can kind of understand, but I also agree with Allison that I lost my train of thought.
I'm going to say this, and I know this is, again, going to be unpopular opinion here. There are a lot of doctors that see fucked up things. There are a lot of nurses that see fucked up things. There are a lot of firemen that see awful things, very similar to what is seen in the military. And the people, and if you look statistically at abusers, it's people in the military and it's police, right? But I don't think that they see... I think that the difference in the military is if you are overseas, and not everyone goes overseas, but if you go overseas and you are in the military environment, which is a very different environment in terms of having to answer to people and not having a lot of freedom, and then you see combat, that's one thing. But the reality is, I think that we overly explain away that PTSD and the DV from people who've never seen combat, who've never left the States.
Yeah,
my
dad
ex-husband tried to do that. My ex-husband was in the Air Force, and he tried to say he had PTSD. You never went anywhere. No, you didn't. Like, we make excuses, and they're not always true. Because cops also, it's about power and control for cops. Because cops have a lot of power and control, right? And so then they go home, and we see a lot of abuse of their spouses because of that power and control piece. They have that in the streets, but if they don't have it at home, that's a problem for them.
Yeah.
But doctors, nurses, firemen, they're EMTs, you don't see DV in the same numbers. So I'm going to push back on that theory that just because you're military, then that's the excuse. No, I don't always think it is. Yes, sometimes it is, for sure. But you know what? I have CPTSD now, complex PTSD, which is the highest form because of what I went through. That's never going to be an excuse for me mistreating someone.
Right.
Period.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. I'm not saying that that's an excuse to mistreat people. I'm just saying about the military mindset. They have like a sternness to them. Especially if they've been in the military for a long period of time. That's the way they live.
Yeah, my dad went to a few different places, and I mean, we're talking about the 70s before I was born. He
was your dad in
Korea, South Korea. He went to Germany. He went to a few other different places. I can't remember, but I know he always used to tell me all the stories about, serving in Korea after, everything that went down with Nam and all that stuff. It's like, he told me some stories, and he always had a gun next to the bed, always had these nightmares of being back there and stuff. And so I get the whole PTSD part, because I used to see it all the time and hear it all the time from him. But you know.
But what do you think
So
is the difference
how
between you not doing that to others and your brother being in jail for DV? Where's the disconnect there? Because you were raised in the same household.
I think when my dad tried to kill me, that was probably, you know, the indication that I didn't want to be like that person. You know, I mean, I love my dad, but you know, to see him, you know, literally have me in the air choking me, you know, trying to end my life, that was, you know, something that I just never wanted to be that type of person. I wasn't a
How old
hurtful
were you?
person. I was 15 years old. You know,
And why
I
do you
just
think your brother followed in his footsteps?
because I mean, I don't know his reason. I can't really give you my brother's reason. He's 7 years younger than me, so he didn't get the meat and potatoes of me and my three older brothers got
Got it.
when, you know, and so he may not have experienced it as you know, prevalent as it was when we were younger versus when, you know, he was the last one born, my youngest brother, and so, you know, it was still going on. It just wasn't, you know, as bad. And I couldn't even tell you because I wasn't there. I was long gone by that point.
I think that's similar in my dad's family. Because remember what I told you about my dad? You know, again, this is child abuse, not domestic violence, but it sounds like it was obviously was going on. You know, the DV was definitely there for your mom. But the same when I said that my aunts and uncles referred to my dad as my grandpa's punching bag. They said when my dad moved out, my Uncle John took his place. Now, I have two uncles between my dad and John. But I think it was just, for whatever reason, out of the 8 kids, those were the 2 that my grandpa targeted. The oldest, my dad. And then when he moved out of the house, then my Uncle John was just, maybe he was just the right age. Maybe, I don't know. He was in a sweet spot where he ended up kind of replacing my dad as the one that was abused. Because I have, there's 5 boys and only 2 of them really got it. You know what I'm saying? Like that. I'm sure they all have got it. Trust me. But you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Like I seen all my brothers get them up with my dad, and we've talked about this before. Like, you know, all of them. I seen all of them actually, you know, get in a fist fight with my dad. You know, over just him thinking that he's better and bigger and stronger than everybody, and not really caring about, you know, his kids. I mean,
what do you think your
like
dad? What do you think your mom and dad's relationship is like now? Do you know?
Probably the same. My dad does whatever he wants, and my mom, you know, just kind of, you know, steers
Goes with
clear
it.
of. Yeah. You know, that's how it's been for a long time. You know, like I haven't even talked to my dad in probably, at least a year and a half, 2 years. It's been a long time, and they live together. I talked about my mom was up here, you know, in September, you know, and still he didn't offer to call or talk to me. He didn't, you know, that's just how it is. It's always been that way.
He is very unhealed.
You know, so.
Yeah, we all are.
Yeah, but some of us are doing the work. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. That's
I
true.
mean,
tomorrow.
There's work that can be done, and you know, it's not really. I mean, I could always be the adult and you know, reach out, but like at some point, you know, there has
sometimes
to be some type of
sometimes it's just
reciprocation.
like,
If there's going to be a,
yeah.
you know,
Look, I'm not. I do the best that I can to, you know, do what I do. I got a show that I got to prepare for, you know, and I'm still trying to, with everything that's going on, I'm still trying to maintain.
Absolutely.
You know, and sometimes it's hard. You know what I mean? Like I said, you know, I'm sad. I'm not depressed, but I'm sad. And, you know, like I was going to, you know, inbox you and say I didn't feel like making it, but I've always was taught, even in, you know, like the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, when you don't feel like doing something, that's when you need to do it.
Absolutely.
And I live and not live my life like that. Because there's a lot of times I don't feel like going nowhere, but I get up because I know that's what I need to do.
Absolutely. So I know we're getting really close to the time to get off, but I really wanted to give you guys a couple questions, and I think Carmen may have had to go, so it's just me and you. Oh, there she is. All right. So after our episode, Allison, I talked to you about this already, but after our episode, I had somebody reach out to me after the toxic episode. Someone reached out to me and explained to me they were going through a domestic situation, and and I just kind of give a brief um, breakdown of what she told me, that she was with this guy and they were together for a couple years, and he seemed to be like the perfect man for her and everything went so well. They were hanging out all the time. They played poker. They went everywhere together, traveled together, and everything went so well for a good straight 2 years of nothing but good times. And then one day they decided to have a party at their house. And as they were at the house partying, there were some friends that came over. And then there was a couple of his friends that came over that she didn't really know anything about. But, she met him that day. And so they're having this big party. Everybody's doing their thing. And then he decides he's going to step outside real quick. So he goes outside and she ends up, wondering where he's at. So she went out there to check on him, and I guess he was out there doing some cocaine. And so she sees it, and she's like, asking him questions about what's happening. And all of a sudden some trigger goes off, and he gets really upset at her because she's all up in his business. And so she pushes back, and she's like, okay, well, we can talk later. And so, long story short, after that moment and that conversation that they had, when everybody ended up leaving, I guess he ended up abusing her and hit her a couple of times. And she thought it was just, because he had been drinking and did a couple lines or whatever. But from that moment on, she said it continued to happen every weekend. It was happening and it was happening. He was being abusive physically, emotionally, verbally abusive to her. And eventually she figured this is the person that he's been, kind of staying away from for a long time. And so she ended up packing her kids and all her stuff and leaving, and now she's staying with a friend until she can find somewhere to go. So this person is watching right now. I'm not going to tell you who this person is, but what kind of advice would you guys have for her moving forward?
I mean, I would say, first of all, you made the right decision, and I know how hard that is. In reality, it sounds like that person that their spouse, it's the drugs that was causing the issue, probably more than anything, because that's what I saw as the common pattern is he would use drugs and then they would fight and whatever. So unfortunately, it's sad that if they had a healthy relationship at one point, that he didn't get help for the drugs. And I know that all too well.
Right.
All too well. So you are brave. And you made the right decision for you and your children. Number one. Number two, I don't know what county you live in, but every county has resources. I will make sure that David has and I'll post it in the thread on David's page, that there's the national, domestic violence hotline, but also there's a state set of resources that exist to you. If you live in King County, Dawn is the domestic abuse women's network is a resource that's available to you. I would say if you have access to therapy, and almost everyone has access to therapy of some kind, make sure you get yourself into therapy. If your kids experience that, doesn't sound like he was their dad, but if your kids were there and they experienced that, make sure your kids are getting therapy. And you can always reach out to me to talk. I'm a domestic violence advocate now. David will tell you, and if you've listened to me at all during any of these conversations, I'm not going to sit around and be a victim. I am a victim, but I'm not going to take that victim mentality into everything I do. There are moments where I'm like, fuck you, I'm having a hard day because I've been through XYZ. But for the most part, I try and take my experiences and my pain and I turn that into something to help other people. So within a year of me being, almost murdered at the hands of my husband, I became a domestic violence advocate for the state of Washington. Then the pandemic happened and I haven't done much with it, to be honest. I would like to be starting I'd like to start some online or some in-person support groups, but I haven't done that. But there are lots of resources out there. If that person wants to talk, like I'm always accessible. I put my comedy handle in my name up there because some of you guys know I'm also a professional comedian, but not a professional. I'm trying to be professional.
Doing great though.
But that is my comedy handle. But you can also find me on Facebook at Allison MH Fine, and friend me and reach out to me. And I would love for everyone to get to where I am, where they are speaking their truth and they are helping someone else with their story. Not everyone's going to get there, and I get that. But I would love to empower others,
I'm going to say, whoever you are, love, look, it wasn't the drugs that made that all that come out. It was already in him. The drug was just a vessel to bring all that out of him. But you did what you were supposed to do. You got your children and yourself in a safe space. Stay in that safe space. Get therapy if you can. Do whatever you can possibly do to be the best person that you can be. You can reach out if you need to talk. I'm Phoenix Rain on Facebook, but my real name is Carmen. You can inbox me, and but yeah, you did what you were supposed to do because it was already in him. He just used the cocaine to use that as an excuse for doing what he wanted to do.
Absolutely. I have one more, and then we're going to close up shop. And me and Allison, we talked about this as well. We talk a lot. So I have another friend. I have a lot of friends that are kind of going through this situation right now, and I know there's a couple of them watching, and so I need to speak on it a little bit. So last week, me and Allison talked about my friend and how she was with her husband for a lot of years. They got kids together. They've been married for I think 13 years was what she told me. And one day he disappeared, and they did not know where he was at. They didn't know where he was, what he was doing, and so she had posted his his picture on Facebook and said, if anybody sees this particular individual, call her so that she can get in contact with him. She's worried about him, etc., etc., etc. Come to find out, she ended up finding him. And when she found him, he was actually high on meth. And so she was talking to him and trying to get him to get some help, and he was freaked out. He thought that everybody was against him. Obviously the drugs were taking him to a whole nother place, and he even thought that she was against him. And so he had this episode where he lost his cool. And they ended up driving home. She took him home and she tried to take care of him while he was at home, and he ended up freaking out on her and tried to kill her, and choked her until she went unconscious. And she said that she's seen herself. She said that she thought she died and she got out of her body, and I mean, this is the story she's telling me, and I'm just in awe that she is still here today, and I'm so thankful that God, uh, you know, gave her new life, and so she said that she watched herself, and he was literally choking her to death, and God spoke to her and told her that it wasn't her time. And so she said she went back into her body and she woke up, and he was like, "Oh, thankful." He was so thankful that she was alive, but he said, "I got to kill you now. I have to kill you or you're going to tell someone." And so he went to do it again, but she was like, "I need to use the restroom." So she went to the restroom and she basically made a way to escape this situation. And when she escaped, he went running after her. She got away, and then he ran from the police. Long story short, he's in jail now, and he's locked up. He's going to court for murder, and I guess his
Attempted.
trial
Thank you.
attempted murder. Sorry about that, attempted murder. But she has to go to trial tomorrow for his, the whole
Mm.
setup, trial, and everything. What can you guys tell her right now before she goes and sits in court with this man again?
Put on her armor, pray, have good thoughts, and just stay calm. Stay calm. But the biggest one is to put on your armor and pray.
This is a little close to home for me, because and David, I don't know if we talked about this on the original episode.
We didn't talk. It was after the episode. Remember, we talked after.
No. What I'm saying is when I came on the show the first time and talked about my DV, I don't know if I talked about how it started, but that's how it started. He would disappear, and he would come home, and at first my husband was drunk and would be like, "Oh, I have a problem with alcohol." And then one time he came home and he was just acting erratic. He was looking under the beds. He was looking in closets. And I realized, like, this is drugs or a mental health break, one of the two. And I realized later it was drugs and it was meth. So this is exactly the experience that I had, right? And the reality is I find it hard as a survivor of what I went through. I don't go to a lot of survivor groups because what I went through was so extreme that I don't find myself relating to a lot of people. Because with what I went through, most people who experience what I went through die. And so there's not a lot of people that have been through what I've been through. And her situation is quite similar in that way, right? Like the extensive amount of abuse.
Yeah.
It wasn't just an assault and battery charge. It was an attempted homicide. And so it's really hard for me to think about this. But what I will say is surround yourself with the people who love you and the people that will protect you, both physically and emotionally. Make sure that you are connected with all the resources that you have in your community. Again, through the court system, there's always a victims liaison, a victims advocate that will have additional resources for you. If you are concerned about when this person gets out, if you're concerned that he will come back and try and harm you, then make sure that you have those resources. There are victims, there are programs to hide your mailing address and things like that. So make sure you know those if that's a concern for you. I will also say on a personal level, I don't know if this person is watching right now, but David, you can also share this message. Is this person in Pierce County? Are they local?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I will clear my schedule tomorrow and I will come and sit with you if you need someone.
That's awesome.
Like that. I realize that I'm a stranger, but I'm a stranger in that I don't know you yet, but I am not a stranger in what you've experienced. So if that person needs like literal physical support tomorrow, I will be there. So please offer that
That's
to that person
awesome.
Awesome.
because
That's
Absolutely.
definitely awesome.
it's
That's
not
awesome.
that you can look at your friends and your family and the people that love you, and you can get a lot of support. But someone who sat in those shoes, someone who's been in that courtroom, someone who's my husband took a plea deal. He wasn't stupid. He knew what he did. You know what I'm saying? Even
Yeah.
though he didn't do that because he hated me. He did that because he was sick. He did that because he was high. He did
Right.
that, he did that. He did that
But
because
you still had to suffer the consequences. That's what I.
100%,
That's
100%.
that's what I need for you to understand.
Oh no,
He
I
did
do.
what he did, but you
I know.
had to deal with the after effects.
And people oftentimes say that I have an amazing amount of grace. And when he got sentenced at the end of 2020, and I read my victim's impact statement, the clerks of the court were crying. I'm a writer, right? I'm a writer. So my words were so impactful that the clerks of the court who see this inside and out every single day of their life, the judge was like, I can't imagine where you get the strength to have that much compassion, because I've always realized what my husband did to me came from a mental health issue that was undiagnosed, and a drug and alcohol issue. But I also made him go to the VA and get an assessment, and he didn't want to take the meds that they wanted to give him. I also told him, this is something that you need to get under control. So I never advocated, oh, I don't think he should have to do time for what he did to me. Of course, he tried to kill me, but I've had an amazing amount of grace in the fact that they wanted to give him 30 years. And then they asked me about taking off all of these like extra charges, like false imprisonment and the weapons charge, things like that. And I was okay with that. The max sentencing for attempted homicide is 18 years. The minimum is 12.4. And when my victim's advocate asked me what I wanted, I said, give him 12.4, because he needs to sit down for what he did. But I believe that the person that married me, the person that loved me, he worshiped the ground that I walked on. I believe that he can get help, and I believe he can be that person for someone else. So I have an amazing amount of tolerance and grace. I don't know where this woman stands on it, obviously, and I don't know her situation, but I know that those are the choices that I made for myself, and this is what I'm okay with. But for your friend, again, please reach out to her if she is not watching, and tell her that I will come and I will sit there with her.
Absolutely.
Because those are shoes that I have walked in very
Absolutely.
recently.
That is, I definitely let her know for sure. Absolutely. Man, thank you guys so much for the conversation. Thank you so much, Allison, for sharing your story again. You're an amazing person, and we appreciate you for everything that you have, given us and taught
What
us. And what's that?
makes me sad is that there's 3 people on this, and honestly, it could be interchanged with almost any other 3 people, and everyone would have a story. Look
Yeah,
how
for
different
sure.
our stories are, right? The
Absolutely.
damage that was done to Carmen has created a lifetime of her own issues, of her own, her own choices of, Carmen's been open about her own addiction issues, her own abusive issues towards other people. David, what you've experienced is, thank God you're not repeating that cycle, but
Right.
you went through extensive abuse, both your own physical abuse from your father, but also watching it done to your mother. And I'm sure where where your head must be, considering they're still married and all of that, right? Like,
Mhm.
and then what happened to me? But if you interchanged us with 3 other people, and then 3 other people, and then 3 other people, you would hear different versions of these stories over
Yeah,
and over. So
absolutely.
at the end of the day, I think if we all did a little bit to work for an organization, volunteer, give money, whatever, towards prevention or
Mhm.
towards supporting people who are getting out of those abusive, cycles, we would be a better world. I think that if there was more preventative programs, so these young people realize what your dad is doing to your mom is not okay, and you don't have to repeat that cycle. Like, there's so
Yes.
much that we could be
Yes.
doing, but programs like this also open the door for people to talk about it. And
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
Carmen and I are extremely rare in the ability to say, this is the shit we've been through, the goods, the bads, and the ugly, because
Mhm.
this
This
allows
is the
other
shit we
people,
put you through.
you know what I'm
Yes.
saying, to reach out to us. Because people can reach out to Carmen and
Yes.
be like, I abuse my kids, I use drugs, how do I get better now? I'm 50, and Carmen can give them her path. People can reach out to me anytime and say, this is what I've been through, how do I heal from this? And I could give them my journey and
Right.
walk down that path with them, if they need that. So, and David,
Yes.
people could reach out to you and say, I've been abusive to my family and I don't want to do this anymore, how do I stop?
Right.
How do I stop? Yeah.
And you could
Absolutely.
give them advice on like why you don't do it versus what you lived through. So it makes me sad in a way that it's such a prevalent issue, both child abuse and domestic violence, but also it gives me hope because there are people like us that are willing to talk about it and willing to
Absolutely.
be
Yes.
resources and willing to put a face to a face and an experience to what so many people are hiding behind the scenes. So I commend you
Yes.
both for being here with us. Like I'm grateful
Yes.
to be here, but I'm grateful to know you both too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Right
you.
back at you, baby girl. Right
Absolutely.
back.
Right back. So, guys, thank you guys so much for being here. Again, I did leave a link in there for the National Domestic
I,
Violence Hotline.
I will get the other link for you that I have with the Washington State resources.
Okay. But I'm gonna read it for those that aren't actually in the comments. The number is 1-800-799-SAFE or 7233. And second number is 1-800-787-3224. And those are the
Oh,
national domestic. Yes.
I also want to just remind people always that a lot of these behaviors that we've experienced put us in dark places. And
Absolutely.
I want to remind people that 988 is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline.
Yes.
And if you are thinking of self-harming and you need resources, please don't hesitate to call because you are not alone. So 988 for anything having to do with self-harm and suicide, because people who've experienced the things that we've experienced, if unhealed, if unchecked, we could go down the path of self-harm, go down the path of I don't think my life is worth living. And trust me, your life is worth living. So 988 is another great resource for everyone.
Absolutely.
Most.
Thank you, ladies, so much for me. Thank you, Kai, for coming on. I know you had to get going back to work, but thank you guys so much for the conversation.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, we're gonna do it again. This is just the start. Like I said, this is just the start of many to come. This is the only. I mean, to me, like Allison said earlier, the best way to continue to work on fixing the problems is talking about it, getting it out, figuring out methods to, kind of change the narrative of these stories and educate
Definitely
ourselves
gonna
more.
give
So
I'm definitely gonna give you a shout out on the show tonight and let people know that, Circle Talk, they do, and I'm absolutely honored and proud to be a part of, whenever you ask me, just,
absolutely, you my sister,
Yes, I'm definitely, I love and, sharing my story, because like
Absolutely.
Allison said, there's people out there who have been through similar situations or
Yes.
have not, and they're just new to this situation.
Mhm.
So whatever, if you're in a situation, get help. I don't care who it is. Have that one person, just one person that you can talk to, that, because you got to keep a paper trail, definitely keep a paper trail, put your armor on, pray. And, if you pray, God got you. God got you.
Absolutely.
All
right. So in 2 weeks, you guys, we're going to be back for another mental health check. It's going to be a holiday health check. Since the holidays are coming up, we're going to talk about how, these holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas can have a positive and a negative effect on our mental health. We'll talk about that in 2 weeks. We'll be back. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, ladies, again for an amazing conversation today. We're out of here. Y'all have a blessed rest of your day. Take care.
You as well.
Bye.
Thank you.